Okay, super. Thanks for your patience, everyone. So I'll just dive right in to the presentation. The Community Attraction and Tourism Program is one that's been around for about 20 years, actually closer to 25 now. But it's designed to provide financial assistance to recreational, educational, and cultural attractions. So it's going to be available to cities, counties, and nonprofits who are eligible to apply. And when we talk about an applicant under this program, the applicant does need to be the entity that's going to take on the investment and be the owner of those improvements once it's made. So we're not able to do pass-through types of things where a city might apply to then turn around and maybe fund a private for-profit sports arena or something like that. The program does not have a minimum or maximum total project cost, and the awards are, and they have over time become more formulaic in that we will consider up to 20% of a total project for an urban project and up to 30% of a total project cost for a rural project. And under this program, a rural community is one of 10,000 in population or less. Regardless of rural, urban, size of project, the maximum award under this program is $1 million. With our annual allocation being 10 million, we've historically had quite a bit of
30%.
competition. I'm sorry. We've had quite a bit of competition for these funds. So at 1 million per project, which isn't really common, but it's, that would at least get us stretched across the state to a minimum of 10 projects in any one year. The Iowa Economic Development Authority Board does administer this program. That's changed over the years. So for those of you that have maybe been in economic development for a long time, you may have heard of the Vision Iowa Board or the Enhance Iowa Board. That's who formerly did administer these funds, but it is now the Iowa Economic Development Authority Board. A couple more just facts about the types of projects that we can fund under this program. Projects do need to be open to the public. That doesn't mean they need to be free. So we can fund things like a museum with an entry fee or something like that, but it does need to be something that anyone could come and enjoy, not restricted by a certain membership or group. Projects do need to be primarily vertical infrastructure, which generally just means construction, major renovation. It means that we cannot assist with, something that's really tied to more of furnitures and fixtures or more applicable to these types of projects. We couldn't have a museum come in and redo all of their exhibits because that would not be primarily vertical infrastructure. We need to have some building maintenance or major renovation, if you will, not maintenance. We're also not able to do any type of operational costs, marketing, that kind of thing. We do require at least 65% match, and we ask that the projects coming forward to the state for this type of funding have a broad base of funding. So city, county, and private funds all represented within within the fundraising that's been secured. It doesn't have to be at equal amounts, and we certainly don't have a minimum percentage or amount that has to come from the city or county per se, but some amount of skin in the game, as they say. I don't love that term, but that's been sort of the term that's used over the years, that some buy-in from each of those sources as a part of that funding. The application for this process is kind of a two-step process, although the first step's very simple and straightforward. The first step is to submit a notice of intent to apply. There's no requirements for this notice. It's really, truly a one-page good faith notice of what you expect to construct or build or do with the project, how much you think it'll cost, and approximately what timeline that you're working on. None of these things are set in stone. We understand those things are likely to change, but it does allow us to sort of open up the lines of communication with those that are most interested in applying, and also maybe get some flags out there if there is an eligibility concern. If I get a notice of intent to apply that is for a project that's maybe not primarily vertical infrastructure or something like that, it gives me a chance to reach out to that group and say, I'm not sure this is going to be a good fit. I don't want you completing the full application only to find out that we're not able to assist. So really designed to just offer that kind of open communication and feedback. From there, we would provide the full application form. and encourage applicants to work with us as they do that, and then submit that application when they can meet those local match requirements and provide the documentation that's requested. We do want to have budgets that are prepared independently, so we have a good sense for if a group thinks that they're going to have $1 million project, that there's some basis for that budget, as well as just some renderings and information about what's being planned. We do require under administrative code that every applicant have at least 65% in order to apply. From there, the IEDA board, who oversees the funding of these, likes to be the last dollar in, which means they've asked us to bring applications forward when a CAT recommendation, an award recommendation, would bring the funding to at least 90% of the total project cost. So depending on rural and urban, that's going to look a little bit different. It's also just going to look a little bit different based on the size of the project. If you're bumping up against the $1 million cap, you may have to come up with a higher percentage to close that, to get into that 90% before we would consider an award. Really, they hope to make these awards and see projects getting started within 3 to 6 months with their construction if possible, and completed within about 2 years. Applications are reviewed by the CAT committee and IEDA board every month. So that board meets monthly, and so we accept these applications on a rolling basis. I'll work with them as well as my team to make sure everything's documented and clear to understand, and then we'll get that in front of the board in about 6 to 8 weeks from when it arrives. Kind of depends on when it shows up on our desk compared to when the next board meeting is, so we can help projects kind of fine-tune those timelines as needed. From a contract administration standpoint, I touched on a couple of these things, but one important part that I hadn't touched on is that these grant funds are dispersed as a reimbursement. So this can have some cash flow implications for applicants. So you will, say propose $1 million project. We've maybe awarded $200,000 to it. The applicant will need to submit $1 million worth of project expenses to end up drawing down that $200,000 award. So it's not uncommon for our applicants to have to come up with some different cash flow opportunities to make sure that they can go ahead and complete the construction and then draw down the grant. We do have annual reports required. They're pretty straightforward and easy, just kind of a snapshot of where you are on your project and construction and so forth. And then closeout, of course, will want documentation that the project was completed as proposed, and that you expended the funds that you proposed to do so. And we do hold on to 10% of a CAT award. We retain that until we get those closeout materials in, just to make sure everybody gets that final piece completed and submitted. And then we release that bit of the CAT award with a congratulations. And we've had a lot of success with that process and getting folks kind of moving through it. The next program that I wanted to talk to you about is Destination Iowa. This program shares a lot of similarities with CAT, but some differences too. And our team, the same folks that work on CAT, also work on Destination Iowa. It flows through to the same board, so there's a lot of consistency there. The really primary difference between Destination Iowa and CAT is the emphasis on tourism. So on this slide, I included the definition of a primary destination. And this is really important for Destination Iowa because the legislators that created this program really emphasized to our team that they wanted these funds to be dedicated to projects that have a primary purpose of promoting tourism. So we have a lot of wonderful amenities and projects that are coming up through the CAT process that are wonderful but for a primarily local audience. Destination Iowa is really designed for those projects that can demonstrate that they're looking to pull people in, they're looking to get people to stay overnight and do those kinds of things. So that's going to be the primary difference between these two programs. Grants under Destination Iowa are up to 25%, regardless of rural and urban. But similar to CAT, there's cities, counties, and nonprofits that are able to apply, and also must be primarily vertical infrastructure. So still looking at facilities, construction, and major renovation. The application process is a little bit more rigorous under Destination Iowa. We do have a full pre-application, which is accepted on a rolling basis. And these pre-applications are evaluated by the IEDA team that we have, and basically looking at kind of that stuff I already shared about. Does this really demonstrate that this project is designed to draw people in? Is this going to serve a population outside of the local population? And if so, in what ways? So we have kind of a sort of simple scoring process, which we share with our applicants, to determine whether it's really meeting that requirement and that goal of tourism. If it is, those applicants are then invited to make an application. If it falls below those scores that are referenced there, 12 and 14 for rural and urban respectively, then we would typically, if it's a otherwise qualified project from a vertical infrastructure standpoint and so forth, would recommend that those applicants seek funding through CAT instead. From there, when the final application comes in, a scoring committee is identified by Director Durham, and they are scored on those criteria. And so, again, it's a very rigorous review, looking at economic impact, the primary destination, project financing. So convincing IEDA staff that you should be invited doesn't automatically mean funding. There is still this scoring criteria. I will say, and I'm proud of this, that the projects that have been invited to come through have been very successful in that scoring process and receiving an award. So I think that hopefully we're hitting the right note in getting those applicants in that are truly meeting the goal. There are some minimum total project costs with this program as well. So urban projects must be 5 million or greater in their total cost, and rural projects must be at least 1.5 million. In this program, and this comes straight from the law, so sorry for the discrepancies, but the population needs to be less than 20,000 to qualify for rural. So it's another situation where maybe you have a project that is tourism, but it falls below these total project costs, or these minimum project costs rather, in which case we would have you, would recommend that you look at CAT. Really similar from a contract administration standpoint. Grant funds are dispersed as a reimbursement. We'll have annual reports. They're tied to the funding that is associated with both of these. And then closeout is due within 120 days of completing the project, with 10% of that award being retained until we do receive all those closeout materials. We're going to work with our applicants, of course, if things run slower than expected or there's issues that need to be resolved before we can close it out. We can extend the completion date and we can work with them, and we do, and that's true for both Destination Iowa and CAT. And I think just kind of the way I've been talking about these two programs, it may be apparent, but just to make sure, it is a one or the other. We're not able to award both Destination Iowa and CAT funding to the same project. So we would want anyone kind of thinking about both funds, not sure where they fit, to work with our team and really outline what makes the most sense. But if you do make a try for Destination Iowa and are not successful, we would of course welcome you to try and seek funding through CAT. So certainly here to help and give guidance where we can. That's where I had sort of completed my planned comments on Destination Iowa. I can kind of keep rolling into a few other programs that are central to IEDA and work that we do with cities. And then perhaps I can stop sharing and I can see you guys again and then take any questions that you have. But feel free to jump in if I am rolling forward too quickly. The other program that I really wanted to share with you today is the Empower Rural Iowa. This came out of Governor Reynolds' recommendations, and there was 3 primary goals that were established: the investing in rural Iowa, growing rural Iowa, and connecting rural Iowa. So making sure that there's broadband connectivity. And so that sort of evolved into this Center for Rural Revitalization Programs, which is housed at IEDA. And my colleague works on this specifically, but I included a list there of all the grant programs that exist under this, which they're very robust. There's several of them. I can certainly share this slide deck with you all because there's a link to looking at all of these, but I know enough to be dangerous and mention them in a conversation like today, but I would highly recommend that if this is something of interest to you, to go a little deeper, reach out to the team and learn a little bit more about these funding opportunities. They are extremely popular, and I know they've done a lot of really great projects. It's not huge amounts, but I think that they're finding ways to be quite impactful with those funds. I also wanted to share a little bit about where things are on the Iowa Arts Council. I think that's been something that's really been talked about a lot, and people are curious to know what's going on. The Iowa Arts Council, of course, joined with IEDA recently through some of the changes at the state level. And it's been wonderful, of course, from my standpoint of having those colleagues in our office to collaborate with. But as a part of that, they've really been spending a lot of time looking at how do they offer the most competitive grant opportunities to Iowa artists, organizations, schools, and communities to support creative and cultural development. So right now, they're taking a really big effort at sort of reassessing all of those opportunities and looking to release some program guidelines for our upcoming fiscal year 2027. That begins July 1st of 2026. So a little over 6 months away from now that fiscal year would begin. I think that they are working really hard to get something out, some more communication out as far as what this is likely to look like. But they included some links here and as well suggested that anyone that's really wanting to track this in a close way would be encouraged to sign up for the newsletter and making sure that they're going to be putting that information out into the world as soon as they have it, because they know that there's a lot of interest in what that looks like in the future. Another grant that is housed at IEDA that is really popular is the Iowa Tourism Marketing Grant. This is a $300,000 annual amount, so kind of awarding anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000 out. They do an annual application. It's due at the end of September. So this one would have just wrapped here earlier this fall. But thinking about next year, that might be an opportunity to think about. They're really looking to emphasize a lot of out-of-state marketing, really trying to drive that concept of tourism is pulling people in from at least 50 miles away, even out of state if possible, looking to align some of those plans with the Iowa Tourism Office marketing plan. And then they do have a really great group of scorers. I've had the chance to be one of their scorers, and it's a lot of fun to see what folks have planned there. But included a link here too for those of you that get the slide deck later to look into that and click through and see if that's of interest to you or your communities. I think you guys have already heard plenty about the Catalyst program. So it was already a part of my slide deck, so I didn't want to delete it. I didn't have the heart to, but I have it in there. If there's anything I can speak to, I would be glad to, or also refer you to my wonderful colleagues who run this program. It's a $100,000 option for a grant. Up to 40% of the funds are awarded to cities with populations under 1,500, which is a really special provision, I think, here at the state level to be looking at those communities that are some of our smaller communities that maybe don't come forward with applications to some of the other programs like CAT and Destination that I mentioned, although we have, so they can be a little more daunting. And so this is a really popular program that's been underway. So if there's any questions about it, but I also don't want to hit it too hard, as I think you may have already received a nice, robust presentation about it. And that's it. So I will say thank you and stop sharing since it takes up my entire screen and answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, and looks like we had a couple come in through the chat too. And then I'll also say that Zach will have everyone's contact information from the registration, so he'll be able to get the slide deck shared with everyone um, soon. And then the first question received was for Destination Iowa was 20,000 population limit for cities or for counties?
It's funny. The law says community, which so it says neither. We've been applying it as city, but I'd be open to, talking with if there was a county that applied, which has not actually occurred yet, determining the appropriate designation for rural versus urban. But because it says community, and we are all a little bit in the dark, so we've been applying it as city population of 20,000.
Okay. So then we have a few um, questions. So I'll just take them one at a time. It's from one participant. Um, uh, why did the Cat Enhanced Iowa board get removed? Uh,
Great question. It was a part of the efficiency efforts that were done across the state. They looked at a number of boards and commissions and how can we sort of consolidate these and make them more efficient. And so the Enhanced Iowa Board was one of them. And it was just was it just about a year and a half ago that they made that decision. It was through legislation that sort of consolidated some of the boards. So I mean, the answer that I know of is more about efficiency. I agree. I worked closely with that board, adored many of the members that were on it. They were volunteers and did a wonderful job. I will say the IEDA board that currently is administering it is also doing a great job. Also, volunteers from across the state. So, folks that care deeply about Iowa and the community and what's going on in your communities. So, definitely still doing well there. But I appreciate too the comment that they were great because I agree.
yep. So, and then I think this question about reimbursement, is it possible for the community to submit um, uh, like reimbursement requests as the project goes on, or is it just one at the end? Or
Yep, great
I think
question. So
Cat's like halfway through and at the end. So,
it can actually go as often as they want. I would say the most often I've ever seen is monthly, and we welcome that. If an applicant wants to kind of say every month I send you what I've got, we can do that and kind of keep them flowing month by month. Some projects would prefer to let them stack up a little more, but there's no we don't prohibit them from submitting. It's sort of on a schedule that works best um, for the recipient. I will say though, I wanted to make the point that it is a reimbursement because I still oftentimes get applicants who get their award and then say, when do we get our check? And so I always want to make sure that making it clear that you're paying certain project invoices and then we're submitting back a portion back to you throughout the construction of your project. So the timeline of that though can really be still tailored to the needs of that organization. And I actually really, even though it feels like a lot month by month, it's also it clips along a lot quicker because then they have just a handful of invoices. We can get through them pretty quick, get it turned around and get them paid. When we get a year's worth of invoices, it takes us a little more time. It's quite a few more. So pros and cons to both options, but both are allowed.
all right. The next question is, does it still encourage and allow some future funding costs, such as an endowment fund?
Um, I would say we still do ask about plans for successful operating of a facility, right? So that was a concern for board members for lots and lots of years, as far as making sure that we don't just raise the money to get it built and then it slowly falls into disrepair, only to then need need another grant to get brought back up to a usable place. So we certainly do still ask about that. We can't really do anything with funding of an endowment or anything like that, but we certainly do still ask about what's being planned for operating this facility, so that it can be kept, and maintained over time.
Right. And then for nonprofits, is that limited to 501(c)(3) organizations?
It is not. I would say that's the most common that we see, but it is not legally limited to that type of nonprofit. We do have to, so the law says it's a public organization that has some sort of, tourism or, public good or recreational goal. So we have seen some others, not as often, but not strictly 501(c)(3)s.
Right. And then the final question, which might be our last one, unless anything comes in the last few minutes. Do communities organizations still come to give presentations in person?
This asker remembers my old board and I love it. We did away with presentations. It's really not typical at the IEDA board for those folks to come in and make presentations. So there isn't that requirement. I miss it, but I also understand where they're at, and they actually see quite a few programs on every one of their months meetings. So just from a timing perspective, it's difficult to do those kinds of things. But we always do welcome attendance in those meetings if they would like, and they are always welcome to address the board if they would like to. But we did away with the presentation. So I guess this person may be happy or sad about this. Some people hated the presentation. So for those people, they're glad. But yeah, that is gone from the process. Thank you so much for asking about that.
All right. Yep. And I haven't seen any more questions come in, and we usually do try to wrap this up right at 1:30. Should be respectful of people's time, and I've uh, got some positive feedback about having a nice half-hour long session during the day. So speaking of that, I did want to remind people that we have some more planned Turbo Talks in the next few months. In December, we'll be covering ECOG's nuisance enforcement program. That'll be covered by our housing specialist, Mark Culver. And then in January, our environmental specialist, Megan Prestigard, will share an overview of the couple um, water and wastewater treat grants that can be used for water and wastewater treatment plant and system improvements. And then in February, I will be back covering on top of myself, and we'll talk about the CDBG Downtown Revitalization Program. And as I said, we've got your contact information from the registration, so Zach will get out the slides. And then, Elaine, I believe, was your contact information in that slide
You know
deck?
what? If it wasn't, I will quick add it before I send it over to you.
Okay, so everyone will have the slide deck and Elena's contact information. So thanks so much for the great content today. We appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.